Israeli forces have attacked Iran less than an hour after being warned against it by US President Donald Trump. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says a radar installation was destroyed. At least 2 explosions have been reported near Iran's capital, Tehran. Now, these are some of the latest pictures from the city of Bab el-Sar. Netanyahu says after talking to Trump, Israel has refrained from further strikes. And US President Trump says Israel and Iran both violated the ceasefire hours after it came into effect. Israel accused Iran of firing missiles towards it, which Iran's military chief has denied.
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land.
We go to Dan Perry now, who is an Israeli affairs analyst and the former regional editor of the Associated Press in the Middle East. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Thanks very much for being with us here once again, Dan. If we can go, first of all, to Donald Trump and what he has said over the last couple of hours in regards to being extremely unhappy with Israel, with Netanyahu, and its violations of the ceasefire. He even urged Israel to turn the planes around that were on their way to attack Iran. I mean, can this be seen in any other way than a remarkable intervention by a US president?
Oh, everything about this entire American behavior of the past week or even 2 has been remarkable. Beginning with a weird, implausible deniability that Israel's on its own, and then ending up with joining an Israeli attack on an enemy country, which I don't think has ever happened in the history of Israel and the U.S. Ending with the past 12 hours where Trump seems to be declaring a ceasefire on behalf of the parties, making claims that may or may not be true, that they asked him to do this, and then trying to interfere with a time-tested and very infantile Middle East paradigm of both sides having to fire until the very last minute with some weird game of chicken where whoever fires last wins or whatever it is. Trump is trying to lay down the law and present himself as the sheriff of the region, which runs, of course, counter to his original notion of, at least half of the MAGA movement's notion of being isolationist, essentially, and ending, of course, with him dropping the F-bomb at his, airport news conference.
Yeah, as he departed.
On both sides. So, yeah it's remarkable.
You're saying that
it's remarkable.
Yeah.
And I think, by the way, Tom, it might be performative. He might be giving the Israelis some sort of cover because they feel they have to respond to the rocket that came after the ceasefire, and now they say they can't because, well, they obviously owe Trump quite a bit. So it could be essentially theater.
You said that Donald Trump's trying to lay down the law, that he wants to be the sheriff in town. Is Israel and Netanyahu going to allow him to do that?
I don't think Israel really has as much latitude as I sometimes hear from various commentators and questioners. Israel can't, completely violate the will of the U.S. Israel, its Air Force will run the spare parts without the U.S. in a matter of weeks. It can't continue such a massively impactful operation without U.S. acquiescence, which is why I was convinced from the beginning that the U.S. was at least tacitly involved and had given a green light. And what follows will certainly involve the U.S. The end game to all this may be a little bit more complex than the previous speaker from Tehran was suggesting. Iran is it can't negotiate with the U.S. on equal footing. I think the coming negotiation will be pretty brutal for Iran, or at least it should be. The U.S. will come with a series of demands. Israel has to sit tight and let that happen. And I think the Iranians will be given to understand that that the operation with U.S. involvement could resume if they continue to play for time and pursue a nuclear weaponization threshold program. I think that ship has sailed.
Does it feel like Donald Trump and the US administration is trying to rein in Netanyahu and his coalition? And how do you think that he could respond here? Because I guess he definitely doesn't want to look weak to either his coalition partners or the people of Israel.
Of course, in theory, that's a calculation. But the reality is that the people of Israel overwhelmingly would like to see the Gaza war over. There are a series of models for how to end the Gaza war and get the Arab world to put significant pressure on Hamas to hand over the keys and disarm. That has to be part of it. But Israel has stood in the way by refusing reasonable solutions that would include a version of the Palestinian Authority with Arab backing. We've been over this before. Netanyahu has done this, going against his own public opinion for fear of the right-wingers in his coalition. But I think there's a possibility that the successes from an Israeli perspective, in Iran, and they have been successes, will enable a recalibration of everything, where we will see some pretty speedy movement with significant U.S. pressure and significant Arab involvement. And I can't overestimate the importance of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the other Gulf countries. This has to happen fairly soon, and if it does, then a lot of things are possible, including diplomatic progress for Israel with other Gulf countries, including Saudi Arabia, but also Lebanon and Syria. There is some willingness there to just really move the needle, as long as Israel also changes its posture. And I think for Netanyahu, I mean, you could say he fears looking weak, but there's another way of looking at this where he has to learn to take a win and know when to fold them. And I actually think if he does that, he might salvage a little bit of his legacy and maybe even become electable again, which as of 2 weeks ago, he was absolutely not.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see how all of this plays out, because things do move incredibly quickly at the moment. That is Dan Perry for us in Tel Aviv.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.